So it's in the spirit of taking things very slowly and with a lot of ease that we will do this practice, perhaps. And the practice itself will be divided into three major parts. We will first work on settling our body, speech, and mind in their natural state, which would be a practice very intimately familiar to most people present here. Probably much more familiar than it is to me. So we'll work on that and just establishing that sense of ease, which is always the best vibe for this day of the Tibetan calendar. Then with that, we'll work a little bit on awakening or bringing forth our compassion using a standard issue, compassion practice from the teachings on the four immeasurable states. And then after that, we'll go into a practice of immeasurable compassion as embodied by the Buddha of compassion in his or her four-armed form. And we'll meditate a little bit on that visual symbol, a visual representation of our compassionate and wise nature. And then we'll go into a little bit of mantra practice using the standard root mantra for the Buddha of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, and then a special pacifying version of that. It is sometimes used to work with things like disease, outer obstacles, inner obstacles, and so forth. So that's the plan for today. And we will be taking very short breaks in between the three parts. If you might need to drink some water or adjust your posture or move a little bit to make sure your body is properly taken care of. But outside of that, it's perfectly fine to also just find a comfortable position in your practice nest, if you're creating one for yourself, to make sure you're wrapped up nicely in this season, which is the winter season for people in the North Hemisphere. And just making ourselves feel comfortable as we gradually adjust our posture and as we begin the practice. On a technical note, this practice is being recorded, but only the speaker is recorded, so you are in no danger of also appearing in the subsequent recording on YouTube, if that's a concern. And also, closed captioning has been enabled in case you're relying on that to follow the practice. So with that, please find a comfortable stationary position. And let's take just a few moments to adjust that position by comfortably arranging the different parts of our body as if these parts were in themselves a mandala, a graphic representation of enlightened reality, which needs to be harmoniously positioned in order to represent the wisdom and compassion inherently present in us. So it's in the spirit that we perhaps might elongate the spine a little bit. Spend a few moments adjusting our shoulders, our hands, our fingers, placing our legs and feet in a comfortable configuration. And with that, allowing our awareness to descend into the depths of the body, coming in contact with the sensations that we might be experiencing in the parts of our body that are currently in touch with the ground beneath us. Connecting to the earth element that we are relying on, represented by the sensations of firmness, stability, stillness, solidity. Allowing the earth to hold us from beneath. And entrusting ourselves to gravity and its ability to support us in the process of releasing tension. using a simple body scan to support this process by attending for a few moments to the sensations in our feet and toes, observing the experiences, releasing all types of deliberate movement, and releasing muscle tension if that's available to us. Then bringing our attention up to the area around our pelvic floor, our thighs, our hips, resting there for a little bit, furthering the experience of release. And then continuing the body scan as we explore the sensations throughout our torso. Once again, releasing muscle tension if possible, or simply noticing it if it's not possible to release it yet. And then beyond that, allowing this experience of ease to spread throughout our torso, our chest, the area around our shoulders. Then moving down our arms and hands and spending some moments with the experiences around our wrist, our hand, and our fingers. Noticing the sensations, releasing tension, and if possible, also releasing all types of deliberate movement. So that eventually our fingers and hands become completely still. Just resting there and enjoying that state of profound rest and ease. Then once again, moving back to our shoulders, exploring the experiences around our neck. And then spending a few moments with the back of our head, with our crown. And finally, with our facial muscles. Then extending our awareness to the entirety of the body and noticing the natural rhythm of breathing, along with the sensations associated with the process of breathing and arising throughout the body. This natural rocking back and forth that occurs when the waves of breathing are passing through our body. And as we attend to these very gentle waves, the tactile waves, the somatic waves that we experience as sensations, we can allow them to gradually soothe and pacify all the knots of tension in our body, all the buzzing energies that seem to be taking away from a profound experience of ease that is at the same time stable and vigilantly clear. And so allowing the body to breathe naturally, noticing the dance of the sensations, and allowing that dance to slowly and gently undo all the knots in the body, in our somatic, emotional, or energetic field, and in our mind, so that for the time being, we might release all types of rumination and simply rest in the process of relaxed observation. So spending a couple of minutes with just that. And then, as we approach the concluding part of this first brief session, let's take a few moments to generate a truly positive and vast motivation for the entirety of this practice that we're doing together as a community, in real time or by using the recording. In either case, we are uniting our intentions in order to bring greatest possible benefit for all beings, to alleviate suffering, to bring about genuine well-being, both hedonic and eudaimonic, and to transform our minds so that they become perfect vessels for accomplishing these goals. But also, if we have specific wishes and aspirations associated with the outer interdependence in our region, in our country, in the world at large, it's not a mistake to also include those into this preliminary motivation that we will rely upon later in the practice. And that with that firmly embedded in our mind, we can gently return to our body, wiggle our toes and fingers a little bit, rock back and forth. And if we so wish, take a very short break to take care of our body by perhaps adjusting our posture or drinking a little bit of water or rearranging our practice nest before we go into a brief session of compassion practice, which will then in turn serve as the foundation for our practice of the Buddha of compassion. So let's take these few moments and perhaps smile at each other. There might be many familiar faces in the Zoom gallery, and then gradually return to a comfortable position for our meditation. And so in this way, we have prepared ourselves for the subsequent practices. We could have done them without any interruptions, but we're also trying to be very gentle and compassionate with ourselves. And for many of us, due to unique physical circumstances, sitting uninterruptedly for an hour might be a very large challenge. And there's absolutely no need to force ourselves to be that strict with our bodies or minds when we're gathered for this exchange of tenderness and compassion. So we're taking it slowly. We have generated a positive motivation. We have established a certain level of ease, and it is those two components, a positive motivation and certain level of stillness, silence, and spaciousness, that we will now return in the beginning of our next brief session together. For that reason, let's find a comfortable position for our practice. And once again, let's bring our awareness back to the somatic field, or the field of the body, the energetic field where tactile experiences arise. Why do we do that? In order to once again breathe mindfully and release tension, dropping more and more deeply into an experience of stillness imbued with relaxation and vigilance. Some people reconnect with that experience by releasing tension with each new out-breath, each new exhalation. And some find it useful to once again do an abbreviated body scan, revisiting our feet and toes and releasing tension and movement there. Revisiting the pelvic floor and the area around our hips, thighs, our lower abdomen. Spending a few moments with our hands and fingers. with our shoulders, and finally with our facial muscles. Releasing tension and exploring the sensations that arise in this area. And then the sensations that arise throughout the system of the body, pervaded as it is by the waves of prana associated with our breath, the process of breathing. Briefly revisiting our highest aspirations for this practice and for our contemplative life in general, and reestablishing or strengthening that motivation, which for those who are following the Mahayana Buddhist path would mainly boil down to bodhicitta, or the aspiration to attain full awakening for the benefit of all numberless sentient beings. To fully reveal the magnificence of our Buddha nature by eliminating all the obstacles and obscurations that hide this brilliant nature from sight. And then to progress on this path towards the fulfillment of our highest goals, we, for the time being, focus on the practice of universal compassion, which in this case, we will begin with ourselves as the object. And so we gently bring our awareness to ourselves as a person currently engaged in this practice, a person associated with this body and with this mind, with these streams of physical and mental energy. This person with certain personal history, personal aspirations, wishes, feelings, with a unique emotional landscape, and so forth. Bringing our awareness to this very being present here. That's our first object. And we could go directly into the practice of compassion itself by awakening the compassionate aspiration, aspiring for freedom from suffering and its causes. But for some of us, that aspiration might initially feel a bit dry if we don't first imbue it with a quality that is sometimes referred to as tenderness or care or warmth or affection. Tsewa in Tibetan. And to awaken that quality before going into compassion proper, we allow our awareness of ourselves as a being to become warm, affectionate, as if we were saying to ourselves how wonderful that you exist, or as if we were holding ourselves in a giant, warm embrace. that many of us so badly need right now. And so allowing ourselves to rest in this cloud of caring, this cloud of affectionate warmth. Breathing energy into it as we naturally exhale without forcing our breath. And then allowing this tenderness to crystallize into a more pronounced or a more specific mental state, and that is, for this practice, compassion. The wish for this being to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Hedonic and eudaimonic, inner and outer. And so perhaps generating that strong wish, may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then breathing life into this wish as we keep our attention on this being that we call ourselves, that we call me. May I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Some people prefer to rest with this aspiration and then reawaken it or restore it in their minds once it starts fading away, or when the attention slips away, when there's a moment of distraction. And another approach is to rest with the aspiration, but strengthen it with the process of natural breathing, as if we were using our breath to gently blow away all these causes of suffering and all the types of suffering. Remembering that this wish itself, even though we might be generating it somewhat artificially, is a natural expression of our basic goodness. Something manifesting from deep within. And it is on the basis of this knowing that we can recognize that others practicing with us, either in real time or by means of a recording, would similarly have the same basic goodness, the same foundational tenderness deep within their hearts, and the same compassionate or self-compassionate wish to be free from suffering and its causes. And so it is on the basis of that that we can extend our aspiration to others, not forgetting ourselves in the process, and evenly or equanimously rest in the wish of, may we be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Extending it to all the other practitioners connected to us in one way or another, or joining us for this practice. So we'll rest in that for a little while. May we be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then expanding that even further, knowing by extension that all beings have the same foundational qualities, the same foundational wishes, the same foundational potential. And therefore, stepping beyond our limited conceptual frameworks to wish this freedom for all beings. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Working with this aspiration, resting with this aspiration, or breathing life into it as we hold our awareness on the object, the conceptual object perhaps, that is representing all beings at once. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. It is also entirely possible that in this process, the very solidity of the subject sending out compassionate wishes, the objects that his wishes are connected to, the solidity of those would melt away, and our compassion would feel as if this very strongly directed energy was manifesting from within each sentient being, from the depths of reality that they experience. And yet from our side, it's still the same process of strengthening this aspiration and resting in it for a few more moments. And then allowing our attention to once again return to the body, our anchor in this practice. Noticing the physical sensations, introducing a tiny bit of movement by rocking back and forth, moving our hands and fingers, and compassionately taking another very short break before the final part of this group session. And using this break in order to take good care of our body once again by drinking water, moving a little bit, dancing a little bit if that's what's necessary to help our joints feel better. And then once again, slowly, at our own pace, returning to a comfortable stationary position. As we go into this last part, which will involve a little bit of visualization, if you choose to join that part or use that element, which will be, of course, firmly based in the traditional teachings on the practice of the Buddha of compassion. As we're doing that, I will activate the slides with some visualization aids. And later on, when we switch into the mantra practice part, we will switch to a slide that contains the 2 mantras that we will chant for a short while. So if you need those cues or want to use them, they will be on the screen and in the video recording as well. And this specific image of Chenrezig comes from the collection of the Himalayan Art Resources that many people would be familiar with. So with that, we first return to the stillness, silence, and spaciousness deeply present in our body and mind. And we once again start the process of establishing ease by releasing tension and superficial types of activity with each natural out breath. Releasing deliberate physical activity, releasing any verbal activities for now until we reach the stage of chanting or recitation. And to whatever degree that's available to us, also releasing even our own tendency to firmly grasp at mental events, including our inner narrative that establishes the solidity of who we see ourselves as. And therefore, as this narrative becomes more dormant, or as it gradually dissolves in innermost silence, we are connecting more and more closely the foundational level of luminous emptiness. Not the type of emptiness that we arrive at through reasoning and profound analytical meditations, but the one that comes through when we release our conceptual activity to a greater and greater degree. And with trust, we allow our basic goodness to manifest, at least somewhat. And at the heart of this ease is the same quality of compassion that we connected with earlier. That's why this state, or this nature of our mind, or this nature of reality, is sometimes referred to as emptiness with the heart or core of compassion. Because natural subliminal understanding of interdependence would be inseparate from empathy, compassion, loving kindness, empathetic joy, equanimity, tenderness, and so forth. So with a certain trust towards our own basic goodness and that of all others, we use the luminous aspect of our mind, the creative aspect of our mind, to manifest a visionary field, a visionary dimension of natural beauty and purity, where we find ourselves seated on a boundless, beautiful field full of different aspects of awakened mind, streams of water, beautiful plants and flowers of different varieties, all imbued with healing power. Majestic mountains in the distance, and a boundless clear sky above us, representing the natural clarity of our own mind, and yet full of rainbows, representations of the mind's creative power. And we as a practitioner find ourselves in this pure dimension, surrounded perhaps by all the other beings practicing with us, and yet feeling completely comfortable, at home, protected, held by this pure dimension. And then within this pure dimension, in the sky in front of us, we suddenly see a beautiful lotus flower floating in the space in front of us, emanating beautiful, fresh fragrance, and once again representing our mind's ability to rise above all the obscurations and manifest its natural beauty. The potential of our radiant or luminous heart. On this lotus flower, we see a shining moon cushion, a flat moon disk that is soft to touch and yet radiantly beautiful and soothing even as we look at it. And on these two supports, the fragrant lotus flower and the moon cushion, instantly appears the four-armed image, the four-armed figure of the Buddha of compassion. Avalokiteśvara, Chenrezig in Tibetan. With a youthful, energetic body made of brilliant white light that is sometimes compared to the purest snow or to the color of autumn moon. This radiantly white color representing the quality of pacification or soothing or calming. The facet of our own Buddha nature that is capable of pacifying all obstacles and everything that is inauspicious, not conducive to the flourishing of wisdom and compassion in the world. Chenrezig is adorned with beautiful jeweled ornaments and silk garments representing different facets of awakening, the six perfections, control over different types of energy or pranas, and so forth. His gaze is infinitely compassionate and loving, directed towards us and all the other sentient beings, with a gentle smile, encouraging and yet somewhat playful. And his first two arms are joined at his heart, holding a wish-fulfilling jewel that represents the quality of bodhicitta, the altruistic intention to become fully awakened for the benefit of all beings. The second right hand holds a crystal rosary or a crystal mala. And the second left hand, a beautiful white lotus flower, once again. These four arms together representing the four immeasurables and the four greats. Four facets of our tender heart. And yet at the same time, Chenrezig is a perfect embodiment not just of compassion and its various forms, but also of wisdom that sees through our belief in inherent existence, our reification. And as we take some moments to absorb this image, to absorb this presence, to feel this presence in front of us, we are reminded that it is, at the same time, a representation of our own basic goodness, present here and now. A representation of all the other enlightened or realized beings that are manifesting for our sake in this visualized form right here and now. That's a window to access their qualities and their blessings for us. And for that reason, Chenrezig is also a representation of our own spiritual mentors in this life. Whether still present in this world or gone beyond. When we visualize Chenrezig in this meditation, that's our window to access the qualities of our spiritual mentors. So we're establishing a heart-to-heart connection right now with our basic goodness, with all the realized beings, and specifically with our spiritual mentors. So let's rest in this feeling of appreciation for a few moments, as if we were breathing in the gentle fragrance of Chenrezig's lotus flowers, becoming more and more peaceful, and yet more and more inspired. And then we add two more creative modalities to this practice. One associated with speech, where we express Chenrezig's qualities by connecting to his mantras. And Chenrezig has numerous mantras and also numerous other texts that could be recited, phrases, hymns, prayers, and so forth. But of course, the root of them all is the very famous formula that comes from the basket display sutra, basket array sutra. And that's the mantra of Om Mani Padme Hum, which also has many forms, including a special pacifying form that is sometimes chanted for pacifying sickness, obstacles, wars, and so forth. So listening to this mantra, chanting it, reciting it mentally or verbally would be a way to use our speech energy constructively. But we also want to use our mind, not just connecting to the form and the sound, but also connecting to Chenrezig's wisdom. And so we imagine that from Chenrezig's heart and his entire body flows a limitless stream, endless stream of light and nectar, white in color. And this stream not only enters our body, speech, and mind to purify, protect, and guide us, it also enters the bodies and the speech and the mind of all beings throughout our world and throughout all the worlds. It's in this spirit, with this visualization, with a certain level of trust towards it, that we integrate the body, speech, and mind aspects together by maintaining the visualization, still seeing Chenrezig in front of us, and chanting the mantra for a little while. So we'll start with the root mantra of Om Mani Padme Hum. And we'll use the most common melody that might be familiar to many of us already. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. We could continue chanting this root mantra or reciting it quietly or out loud or mentally for a while. And this is what can be done if you're using a recording of this practice by pausing it and reciting for a while or chanting for a while. And then we take a few moments to once again restore the visualization, seeing this process of infinite pacification, which also means that all beings gain infinite well-being, the opposite of suffering and obstacles. And as we envision all beings gaining that, as we imagine all obstacles becoming pacified, we will, for a few moments, chant the Pacifying mantra, which is the root mantra with the added syllables of Shantim, Sarva Shantim Kure Soha. May everything be pacified, literally. Om Mani Padme Hum Sarva Shantim Kure Soha. Om Mani Padme Hum Sarva Shantim Kuruye 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 Soha. And then to conclude this process, imagining that deep within us, everything negative or unwholesome or associated with afflictions and negative behavioral patterns and so forth, all of that has been pacified within us. And all the negative types of interdependence that would have brought suffering, strife, disease, and so forth, and the world at large have also been pacified in the same way for all beings, not just for us personally. Imagining also that all beings establish a connection to the qualities, the form, and the mantra of Chenrezig. That all beings are also chanting his root mantra, therefore going deeper and deeper and deeper into their own basic goodness. And then to go back from the elaborate aspect to the simplicity aspect, we imagine that Chenrezig, Guru Chenrezig, invited by us, comes to the crown of our head and sits above our crown, facing the same direction, and then melts into a cloud of radiant white light. And that light absorbs into us through our crown, blessing our body, speech, and mind with the quality of oneness. And so we feel and think that our body, speech, and mind, the body, speech, and mind of our spiritual mentors, and the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha of compassion are one. And with that, we drop the concepts to rest in radiant, luminous simplicity. But because that simplicity at its core still has the same quality of tenderness and heartfelt warmth, it then generates our thoughts of dedication for this entire practice session that we've done together. We once again return to our highest aspirations for contemplative practice in general, but we also revisit any specific dedications that we might have for the cycle that we're about to enter, any specific dedications for beings who are currently suffering, that are homeless, afflicted by disease or poverty, or climate disasters. And of course, all beings who are afflicted by different mental distortions and negative karma, anywhere within the cycles of samsara. May they all find freedom and peace. May they find bliss and well-being. And may they always be under the guidance of great compassion itself, manifesting as different emanations of the Buddha of compassion, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other masters present in this world. And may the life of these masters be infinitely long, and their dharmic aspirations always be fulfilled and bring boundless benefit to all beings. And may we be the cooperative condition for the fulfillment of those aspirations until we ourselves become like the Buddha of compassion. And the final aspiration for this practice, this aspiration of nonviolence. May the precious conduct of nonviolence arise where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but continue to increase forevermore. With that, we return to our body. We bring some movement into the body, rocking back and forth, smiling at ourselves and other practitioners, doing a little victory dance if that feels right, and then slowly concluding this entire practice and bowing to ourselves and to each other, perhaps. Thank you for joining us tonight or today or this evening or this morning. We're all in very different time zones, but it's so lovely to see so many familiar faces, and such an honor to be with all of you. Well, here's to, cheers. Here's to seeing each other many, many times in the next yearly cycle of 2023, hopefully, fingers crossed. And thank you for joining us today. We won't take any more of your time, but as Venerable Tenzin has reminded us in the comment section or in the chat, if you want to make any offerings, actual or purely symbolic, to the CCN General Fund, that will help us in keeping these practices going. We definitely want to organize one in January, and then from then onwards every month. So please join us for these sessions. They'll be slightly different each time to keep things fun and exciting.